So today I'd like to give a very short talk on the idea and the practice of refuge, of taking refuge. I was very inspired by the elements of that practice that those of us that were at the monastery today were able to touch. And we also were given a beautiful talk by the abbess, which is very rare. The abbess of Clarity Hamlet there at Deer Park gave us a talk today, and she talked about refuge and its importance in our practice. So, starting baseline, the word means shelter from the storm. Right? Refuge in all its forms is shelter from danger. And so it's no surprise that that word has become a spiritual term, because isn't that the reality of our situation, my friends? Life is hard. Being a human being is brutal. And finding refuge is a worthy pursuit. Finding refuge is a worthy pursuit. In classical or traditional Buddhist practice, right, which our practice in the Plum Village Tradition, in the tradition of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, is only kind of, right, because we tip our hats to the fact that Thich Nhat Hanh is a revolutionary and invited us to transcend some of the limitations of a religious approach to Buddhist practice, and invited everybody to practice it and to be mindful. He was very clear again and again, saying things like, we don't need any more Buddhists. What we need are more practitioners. Use mindfulness to be a better Sufi, to be a better Muslim, to be a better Christian, to be a better Jew. And so inside of this very open paradigm, let's take a look at classic Buddhism and what it talks about and offers us in terms of spiritual refuge. Sometimes the whole of Buddhist practice can be described as three precious jewels. And those jewels are traditionally enumerated as the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the idea is that we can take refuge, we can find shelter from this storm of our existence inside of each of these three jewels. So let's go through them one at a time and just talk a little bit about what that means and how that looks. So first, the first jewel is the jewel of the Buddha. If, like me, you come from anything that remotely looks like a Judeo-Christian background, right, and you see a statue of a Buddha or the Buddha's image somewhere, or you see people bowing, as they did today in a beautiful ceremony at the monastery, it would be very easy to think that the Buddha is a god, and or that the Buddha is something outside of myself, and that by taking refuge in him, her, that I'm worshiping, right, or idolizing or wishing to be like the Buddha. I'm very happy to report that the exact opposite is the case. The exact opposite is the case. And the way it's said in Zen practice, right, is that if you meet the Buddha walking along the road, you must kill him. And what does this mean? And this reminds us that we cannot allow ourselves to fall into the trap of taking the idea of awakening and putting it outside of ourselves. If we do this, we are weakening ourselves. We are diluting our true nature. In the historical tales of the Buddha's life, when he first achieved enlightenment and kind of came back to society, started walking around and people observed him, again and again, there are these stories of them kind of running up to him because he was so calm and so peaceful and so balanced and somewhat glowing, and asking him questions like, well, who the hell are you? Are you a god? Like, what are you? And his response was always, oh, no. I am not a god or a demon or an angel. I am just one who is awake. And this is what the word Buddha means, an awakened one. And so when we take refuge in this first jewel, what we are taking refuge in, the shelter against the storm of our lives that we are stepping into, is a remembrance of our own Buddha nature. A remembrance of the fact that every single one of us has the capacity to stop, look deeply, and achieve fresh insight. Every single one of us has the power to observe our suffering, see down to its root, to its cause, and transform it, and suffer less. The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism say exactly this, right? Suffering, or as I prefer to translate, dukkha, the word that's used in the old Pali translations. Persistent dissatisfaction is how I like to look at it. Right? So the first noble truth is persistent dissatisfaction exists. You're not alone. Everyone's experiencing that. And then the second noble truth is that dissatisfaction has a cause. It's not random. It's not random. There's a reason why we feel dissatisfied. And then the third, and in my book, the most hopeful noble truth is, well, if something has a cause, then it can have an end. Because that cause can be addressed. That cause can be changed, can be transformed. And of course, the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, is 8 perspectives, practices, ways to live your life in order to effect that transformation, in order to diminish your dissatisfaction, your suffering. For it's to bring about its cessation. And so, taking refuge in the Buddha is nothing more and nothing less than taking refuge in ourselves, in our own nature. And this is not always easy to do. Right? I think I've spent a lot more time in my life being ashamed of myself, being disappointed in myself, being angry at myself, being just flat out flabbergasted and confused by myself than I have spent taking refuge in myself. Right? Then I have spent looking in the mirror and saying, you are of a nature to awaken. All of this suffering that you are experiencing, you are of a nature to face directly, embrace in mindfulness, and diminish. It's not always easy for us to see how powerful we are. In the often quoted line from recently announced presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, she says something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, it's not our darkness that we are afraid of, it's our light. Right? What we are afraid of is how powerful we are. And this fear leads us to diminish the idea of what we really are, to think of ourselves as helpless, to paint ourselves as the victim. I do it too, because it's easy. Much more difficult, right, is to be in the middle of crisis, to be dealing with protracted suffering, the end of which is not clear, and again to remind myself of my Buddha nature, to remind myself that I am designed to, yes, to suffer, but then to look very deeply into that suffering, to learn from it, and to transcend it. So this is the first of the 3 jewels, right? Taking refuge not in some external Buddha, right, but in our own Buddha nature, otherwise said as our own awakened nature. So then the second, right, taking refuge in the Dharma. So the Dharma, Buddha's a big word. The Dharma is an even bigger word. It has, in essence, 3 definitions. the Dharma means all of the teachings. And so everything that we're learning from all these wisdom streams, this is the Dharma. And then the second meaning is the life of love and understanding that a person who is practicing the Dharma lives. A very simple way to say that is the second definition is that the Dharma is the path. Right? So the Dharma means the teachings, but then if you try to follow those teachings, you are walking the path. And the Dharma also means that path. It's also the name for that path. And then the third and my favorite definition of the word Dharma is the Dharma means the cosmos. The Dharma means everything. Everything is the Dharma. Right? So the teachings, the path, walking, following those teachings, and the entire cosmos with us in it. These all mean the Dharma. And here again, with not easily necessarily, but we can take refuge in this jewel. We can take refuge in the Dharma. And that looks different for different people, right? What it has meant for me was that all along, this crazy life of ups and downs and gains and losses, right? Wins and L's, I keep coming back to the fact that I'm just one person. Like, I can't pretend to figure all this out. In a lot of ways, I would say that's hubris. My God, the arrogance, right? To think that I could look at all of this and be like, all right, I got a handle on that. Let me break that down for you. No, that has not been my experience. Maybe it's yours. If it is, please tell me. No. Much more accurately, I feel that I'm in a boat on a stream, right, on a river that's just roaring, just taking me downstream. And I have my little paddle and I can adjust course just about 3 degrees at any given time inconsistently. Right? Because if I get really upset, I forget what my true course is. If I get tired and fall asleep, I forget what my true course is over and over again. Right? I'm just being taken by circumstance, habit, socialization, the programming of society, the system of thinking that is my language that steers me to think about this more than it steers me to think about that. That makes these things easy to understand and discuss, and makes these things complex and obtuse and opaque. That doesn't paint a picture of me being very much in charge, does it? And that can be despairing, and at times it is. And at times it is. Let's not sugarcoat anything here. But I find it also kind of hopeful because it keeps me so humble. It keeps me so humble and keeps reminding me over and over again that if I want to not just listen to my heart and what it really cares about, but if I want to take action from there, I need support. I need support. And so I lean into refuge in the Dharma. I study the teachings. I do my absolute best to practice them. Right? And every time I step off the way, I gratefully, no matter how much effort it takes, redirect myself and try to get back on it. And deepen my understanding. And I seek refuge with the teachers of the Dharma, as we did today, going to the monastery. Right? Everybody is our teacher. Everybody has something to illuminate. And everybody's going to show me something I'm not seeing on my own. And I take refuge in this because I'm very aware that if I had to figure it all out by myself, that I would certainly fail. I would certainly fail. My perspective is too narrow. My emotions are too overwhelming. I'm an emotional creature prone to bouts of irrationality, who's looking at life through a cocktail straw. I have very limited data, and I have a very emotional response to it. Well, welcome to being a human being. And so, knowing this and accepting this gives me the inspiration to do the hard work of seeking out the teachings, of seeking out the teachers, of remaining humble. My favorite passage from the Chinese masterpiece, the Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way, and it could be translated as the Book of the Dharma, is passage 41. And it begins really simply saying, like, when a very wise person hears about the way, they begin to embody it immediately. When a very intelligent person hears about the way, they try to practice it some. And when the fool hears about the way, he laughs out loud. If he did not laugh, it would not be the way. And this, for me, summarizes everything we encounter when we talk about the Dharma, when we talk about the way, when we talk about the teachings. Because at different times, in different ways, we are all three of those people. There are ways that when I encountered certain teachings, that I feel like the oldest, wisest parts of myself were activated. When I encountered the teaching of yoga, I dedicated my life to it. I was like, oh my goodness, like this works. I embodied it immediately as much as I could. And yet still today, I encounter teachings all the time that make me laugh out loud. I am still the fool. And when I catch myself being my foolish self and laughing at the wise ones, at the wisdom streams, I'm still happy. I'm still happy. I don't attack myself. I don't shame myself. Because, oh man, if I'm laughing, at least I know I'm encountering the way. At least I know that the path is somehow making its way in, even if my response is to laugh. So in that way, we take refuge in the Dharma, in the path, and the teachings that define the path. And then finally, is the third and most precious of the three jewels, according to our teacher, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, is the Sangha, the community of practice, the family, as I like to call it. And doesn't that one just sort of make common horse sense? If you're looking to take refuge in a storm, what's the easiest thing to do? Is it easy to look into a mirror in the middle of that storm and say, you got this, taking refuge in the Buddha? Or is it easier to pull out a text and be like, oh, okay, storm survival 101, all right, here we go. Let me go into Warrior 2, to lean on the Dharma? Or is it easiest to pick up the phone, or better still, walk out your door and make contact with the friend? That's a truth that's ineluctable. I don't need to explain to you that when you are with your friends, you have taken refuge. That is a truth that is so obvious, it does not merit conversation. And so Thich Nhat Hanh was very clear with us through his 80 years of teaching. Take refuge in the Sangha. Don't you dare try to do this alone. When he would travel with 100 monks and nuns. Like a gangster. I mean, what kind of entourage is that? Who shows up to the party with 100 friends? And yet, when Thai would tour, this is how he rolled. I have been among them. I have been blessed to be in that group. Let me tell you, there is safety in it. There is shelter in it. There is healing in it. When I made the transition from being a yogi and a teacher of yoga teachers to a novice in the world of Thich Nhat Hanh, this is exactly why. Because I had spent all those years throwing down a yoga mat, and twisting myself up into a pretzel, and focusing on my breathing and focusing on my body. And I had learned a lot. I still do. But the way yoga was being practiced, at least in the places where I landed here in the United States, it lacked Sangha. I did not feel like I had become family with the people I was practicing with. And when I met the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition in the form of the Rock Blossom Sangha, my root Sangha in Park Slope, Brooklyn, the founder of which I saw today at the monastery here in California, it was amazing. Dennis Bone, true mountain of peace. There was a gathering of some of the senior Dharma teachers lay Dharma teachers in North America in our tradition happening at the monastery. So if you're familiar with what an ent is, like a mythical creature that's a tree come to life, like kind of Lord of the Rings style, that's how it felt to be at the monastery today. You'd just be sitting there having your tea or enjoying the view, and then an ent would go by. This Dharma teacher has been practicing for 30 years, just full of power and strength and solidity and peacefulness. It was very beautiful. Very beautiful. I got to hug a few trees in the form of human beings today. Yeah, Dennis Bone was one of them. True Mountain of Peace, that's his practice name, was one of them. When I met that family, I didn't even know that's what I was looking for. Right? I didn't even know that's what I was looking for. I didn't even know that it was possible for a group of essentially strangers to gather as they had for 15 years when I met them. We're a baby Sangha, right? We were only 4 years old. But they were an adolescent, full of piss and vinegar. Passion. And I was blown away by how they loved each other and cared for each other and got to know each other, practiced together, shared so beautifully and powerfully and vulnerably with each other, week after week after week. I didn't know that existed. But it does. That's what we're doing right now. So, taking refuge in the Sangha, in my experience, is what makes the other two refuges possible. If I did not have the Sangha, I think I would ultimately lose faith in the Dharma and the way. If I did not have the Sangha, I think very quickly I would just return to my old habits of focusing on the worst of myself and fail to look in the mirror and see my Buddha nature. So I could go on, but I think I'll stop there. Thank you all so much for listening.